Patrick Findaro here, co-founder of Vetted Biz and Visa franchise. Excited to have on Chris Pena, who's the president of Body 20. Thanks for joining today, Chris.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. Excited to be here.
So, Chris, tell me a little bit how you moved into the fitness arena as well as chose franchising as your principal source of growing.
Yeah. So actually, well before Body 20, well before, when I was a little bit younger, still in college, I actually helped buy part of a gym. I bought half of a gym that was failing with a partner. We kind of turned it around and it was much different than what we do today. Not boutique fitness. It was kind of your grungy black and white gym. It was called One Stop Fitness. You had our it's funny, our actual, it's so different from what we do today that I think it's just a funny anecdote. We were a powerlifting bodybuilding gym. I would
Okay.
garner to say that our female membership base was 1% of our membership base. It was the logo was a side silhouette of a side pose for a bodybuilder with like the shirt off in black in white on a black background, and the belt line said "weakness is a choice," and that was our strap line. So it was like the complete opposite of what we do today, which is fitness for everybody, and this like really attainable, holistic environment. But I moved from, after exiting there, I moved from Colorado to Florida. And in Florida, my wife was a teacher. She followed me. She went from a very good school where like people cared about their kids' education, all this different stuff, to a part of, I would say inner city Miami that wasn't so great, and there were just a lot of things that she felt like she was teaching kids to a test and then teaching them what they got wrong and, going from there. And so she wanted to get back into fitness. She had followed me around. I'd done pretty well, but certainly not well enough to retire at 26 with my last company. And so I had a job. I was helping build a contracting company in South Florida. We went from, I think, 22 to 100 million in revenue. And at that time, we're looking for this business for Kenzie, for my wife, girlfriend at the time, wife today. And as we're going through this, we meet a gentleman from South Africa. And he's kind of doing some market research in South Florida and staying at a friend's Airbnb. And he, my friend knows that he's doing gyms, and he's like, "Hey, you have to try this thing." And I'm like, "Gyms don't work, man. They don't make money
Been
anymore.
there, done
24-hour fitness killed the market. When they went to no enrollment, no anything else." I knew nothing about boutique fitness. I only knew box gyms at the time. One day I lost a bet, frankly. I had to get on a phone call with this crazy guy from South Africa at 5 in the morning, my time, or 5 in the morning, his time, midnight, my time. He gave me a master class on the MS. And when I went through it, I had two questions. The first question was, why have I never heard of this? This is like what everybody in the world wants, right, for fitness. And number two, not just why I've never heard of it, why isn't somebody extremely wealthy? Like, this is the magic pill everybody talks about. And it is not the magic pill. It is extremely difficult to do, but it does compress your time in the gym. And he gave me two really good answers. Number one was, this is the FDA. This is an FDA regulated product, I should say. That being said, nobody had gotten it approved yet. And I don't know if you know how the FDA works. Typically, medical innovation happens in the US, not outside and coming in, right? And so it's hard for a small company in Europe to get FDA approved, right? And that's where all the manufacturers were or cleared. Yeah, sorry, I apologize. Anyhow, he also showed me a couple of companies in Europe who had 300 plus locations and were just crushing it. And so flew him back out. He actually, in our yoga room at our condo building, he came in and trained my wife. My wife was in incredible shape. She'd just taken first call outs at the Florida State IFBB show, had really crushed it, and was reverse dieting out. So she was in the best shape of her life. And in 12 minutes, she's laying on the ground, just destroyed. She's sweating, she's panting. She's 2 days later, she's as sore as she's been in years. And I'm shocked. And so we decided to kind of move forward. How do we go down the franchising path? To be completely honest, to me, Body 20 was always going to be Kenzie's gym. She wanted to be in fitness. She supported me. I was going to support her. Maybe if she did exceedingly well, she'd open too,
Yeah.
But very quickly it caught on. I think partially being where Orange Theory started, there was just a natural desire to find the new thing, right? And people who felt like they missed out on, they could have done Orange Theory. And so we had a lot of requests, and until a franchisee who's now our Meisner franchisee in Boca came to us and was like, "I'm going to open one, and I'd like to open it with you guys."
Okay.
The person from South Africa had already franchised in South Africa. And although today all we share is a name, frankly, nothing else with that company, we thought we had somebody there who knew what they were doing. And so we all agreed to kind of move forward, and we started down this path.
And where are you at now? Fast forward.
So we are just under 300 units sold. In the last year, we've doubled in size twice. We intend to double in size, might be in January, not the end of the year, but very shortly after the end of the year, we'll double in size again. We'll be just over 60 units. Intend to have 100, could be by the end of Q1. We're growing really, really fast. We took a very different approach to franchising. We didn't expect to sell as many as we did, but we had taken 2.5 years off of selling franchises intentionally.
I
And
remember that.
essentially, yeah, we wanted to make sure the unit economics were good, right? And the unit economics, I can truly say, one biggest lesson I've learned as a franchisor in franchising is if you focus there first, everything else kind of happens. Like everybody who's looking to buy a franchise is looking to buy a profitable one. And you don't really have to sell. If your franchisees are saying great things, they're making money, your FDD shows you're making money, it kind of sells itself. And so
I mean,
that's kind of where we netted out.
that's like a good lesson for franchisors listening as well as prospective franchisees, where if you're being oversold, be that much more mindful of what the numbers are, because
Exactly.
the ones that don't have to be, advertised and hard sells, usually they have a lot of inbounds and a lot of interest through referrals or just directly through their website.
Well, there was a good statement, a good kind of conversation about Cycle Bar, which I know they had their troubles, but in the beginning they talked about this kind of inflection point of when their members start buying their franchise, they know that it's working, right?
Yes.
And so that's essentially what happened at Body 20. We have almost always grown by one of two channels, which is we do choose to work with franchise consultants here and there because they do bring us more qualified people. We can
Sure.
say this is the exact person we're looking for, but also our members are our customer, are our franchisee. And I would say, I don't know, 30-40% of our franchisees came from a studio.
And were there earlier attempts to bring electrical muscle simulation EMS technology to the US, or were you really the first one to do it at scale?
I would say first one to do it at scale, but not the first one to do it. There's a ton of, the thing I think me and my partner Greg, when we eventually bought out that South African partner and kind of went through and looked, what we really saw was an opportunity because you had a fragmented market that didn't have a ton of education around it, but there was obvious interest, right? So you had a bunch of personal trainers who had brought a device over from Europe, even though it wasn't FDA cleared. You had a couple of kind of individual concepts where it was privately owned, it wasn't franchised, and they had 3, 4, 5 locations, and it was working, but you could see obvious business flaws. There was one franchise at the time who was significantly bigger than us and now is significantly smaller than us. It proved it worked. You could see, again, obvious flaws in their model that we thought we could capitalize on. And so we took a two-pronged approach to when we started franchising. Number one, we said, look, we don't just want to be first to market because first to market doesn't typically win in fitness. It's usually second or third to market. First to market forges the path, makes all the mistakes, but then second or third, keeps going in that forged path without making those mistakes, right? They got to learn from first to market's approach. That said, the second pronged approach was we really didn't want to make a ton of noise until we got big enough to where, nobody else could really catch up anytime soon. You have the big kind of, platform brands out there that have 10, 12 fitness brands. You have the Orange Theories of the world where it wouldn't be a big stretch for them to open a second concept. They have a huge runway with their existing franchisees and, do EMS, right? And so we said, until we're big enough, we're not going to launch PR. We're not going to make a big splash. We started in January
Word
with
of
over
mouth.
200 units.
Number to
Yeah,
number.
exactly. And in January of this year, we launched our first PR release at over 200 units, followed by one showing, not only are we going to sell them, here's the team we hired to support them. And then here's the fact that we can get you financed too. We have a $30 million fund for our franchisees to be able to open first or second or third units. And so, putting all those things together, we're able to kind of really, create a world where if you're going to talk about EMS, you kind of have to bring us into the conversation, right? In the US.
Yeah. And in terms of cost, I know Orange Theory, it used to be like $250,000 10 years back, but now it's $1 million, 1.5 million. Where does Body 20 kind of fit in that?
We are affected just like anybody else with COVID, unfortunately. And I think labor inflation in 2022 is the worst part of inflation for franchisors if you have a retail setting, because that drives construction costs. So I'd say when we originally started, we were like 350 to 450. We went up to 4 to 5, which was totally fine, totally doable with the returns that we wanted, right? But in 2022, we had a unit open over 600, and we looked at it and said, it's a decent return, but it's not what we want for our franchisees. We have to go back to the drawing board, which we did. So this year, you'll see 2 models in our FDD. You'll see model number 1 is what we call traditional model. It's this big, beautiful build. It's amazing. If you're in Manhattan, you should build it. But if you're in Kansas, you might not need to, right?
How many
And
square
that
feet?
is 16 to 1,800 square feet.
Okay.
It's 420 to 635. And then we did though, however, say, look, we need to also make sure that if you're in a smaller market, you can't, we don't want you to spend that much money. We want to get back to original returns. So now we also have a $400,000 to $500,000 what we call a 3.0 model, which is essentially a compressed version into anywhere from 1,000 to 1,400 square feet. Saves around, on average, we think about $300,000 in rent. I have to put up a little caveat and say, we haven't opened enough to guarantee that, but that's what it feels like when we take the average square foot across the country and delete that square footage. So $300,000 over 10 years is, they can have the same capacity. It doesn't change the business model. It's just $300,000 more in profit for the franchisee, right?
And
Getting
what
the
are
same
we
business.
talking in terms of the owners? What's like the persona ideal franchisee that you're targeting? Are they going to be very involved in the business? What's it look like?
Sure. I think first, when you talk about who you're looking at, there's two things you have to look at. Who is your company and your staff going to work well with? And then who's going to do well in the business, right? You have to have both. And so for who's going to work well with Body 20, we're not your typical fitness franchise concept. We're not if you're just passionate about fitness, you're going to get in here and run your business. And that's not who we are. And there are businesses that do incredibly well with that kind of person. That's just not who we are at our soul. We're me and Greg are.
That type of person becomes a slave of the business where they're like 50K, 80K. And if they're cool with that, awesome. But it's a particular model.
It is. And it's hard to sell. It's hard to exit. You can't really be a multi-unit owner. It just doesn't work the way we wanted. It didn't make the impact we wanted to make in people's lives. And so I would also add that myself and Greg are just very analytical. We operate the company day to day. He's our CEO. I'm our president. We're very analytical, and we're professionals. This is what we've done our whole career, right? We're going to look at a problem and look at the actual data and say, this isn't emotional. This is the only issue. Just fix this one thing.
For better or worse in the fitness industry, especially franchising, they don't have they don't come from an analytical skill set or running big businesses like growing from 20 million to 100 million in revenue.
I think when you see the most successful operators in boutique fitness, who are they? It's PE. It's somebody backed by PE who's managing the business the way we're teaching our franchisees to manage the business, which is, it's not, yes, touchy-feely matters to the customer. It doesn't matter to your business. You have to make, that helps with retention, but there's a whole set of metrics that if you can't manage, you're not going to have a successful business. So kind of who we look for is somebody who's going to fit that, that profile. And then on the business side, what's going to make you successful? You need two things. You need to be able to manage sales, because let's just be completely honest, fitness is a sales business. You're always going to have attrition. People move, they get pregnant. You can do an amazing job. Somebody's still going to quit. So you have to continuously sell. And then we look for somebody who can manage, because we are semi-absentee. That doesn't mean we're absentee. I hate when franchisors make it sound like a stock market investment. Exactly. It's not a security. You have to actually do some work. But ideally, once your business is mature, you should be able to, spend a few hours a week on top of your business. And even in the beginning, you're not in your business. You're not selling a membership. You're not training people, but you are heavily involved in construction and, coaching your manager and making sure that you're auditing your studio and all those things.
What are some of the key metrics, if you don't mind going into it?
Sure. Absolutely. I think fitness in general, and I think this might get a little philosophical, so I apologize up front, but I think the average fitness franchisor is kind of this, they're one of two people. They're purely profit driven, right? Mm-hmm. Or B, they're this touchy-feely, feel-good business. I want I want to help the world, and that's amazing, and that should be a great reason to do business. But it's not how you do business, right?
Or so they're really the facade.
Worse. Well, that happens too. There's 5 metrics in fitness that you have to pay attention to. How many leads do you have? How many of those become appointments? How many of those appointments show up for a workout? How many of those close, and how many of those people cancel? Those 5 levers of your business are the only thing that matter. And when you actually track those 5 things and the ratios in between, you can pretty quickly find the problem. So for instance, if I have a lot of leads and a lot of appointments, but those appointments aren't showing up for demos, I have one or two problems. I'm not following up enough, or I've got the wrong leads, right? It's that simple. But what happens is people start getting, flustered and scared and not sure what's going on. And that's where a franchisor steps in and says, no, guys, let's calm down. I know you're stressed out, but we've seen this happen 1,000 times. This is all we have to do. Let's figure out the problem, and then here's the solution for either one of those problems. It's not that complicated,
And how often are you tracking this and/or your franchisees, those 5 key items?
Every day. We built dashboards for both the corporate level and for our franchisees, to where they can see these things. They can understand what's happening. We have a data visualizer that goes on top of the CRM, because most CRMs are Excel reports, right there. And just let's be honest, your average person in general can't read an Excel document and sort and filter and do all these things that an accountant can do, right? Or an FP&A guy can do. And so what we do instead is we have a data visualizer that'll show you in graphs and charts and just really easy to kind of digest information. Our favorite one is this kind of pipeline in the sales, and it looks like a pipeline, and it gives you the exact ratio, gives you the exact number of people that came in the door, shows you my Facebook, I spent $2,000 and I have a 2% conversion, but Instagram, I spent 500 and I have a 60% conversion. Well, to the day data, not every quarter, like your marketing company would give you. So now what can I do? I can call my marketing company and say, hey, switch that budget to Instagram and let's see how much I can stress it before that return goes down. And so it really helps you get to make smart decisions in your business. And I think because we chose the semi-absentee model, because if you're the one actually selling memberships and you're the manager of your business too, you can't actually focus on that stuff. And so we want you to focus on that so you can then feed that information to manage your manager to actually do the work.
And Chris, how about in terms of like benchmarking? Can of those 60 plus units, like can the franchisee compare his unit to maybe his multi-unit operator, other locations, or even other units in the system?
Incredibly important. So yes, we believe in franchise forums. So we have group chats with our franchisees. We have some for sales, some for training, some for member experience, where you can just talk to everybody else. There's a very simple way to do it. We use an app called GroupMe for that. We're on there moderating the whole time. So like if somebody comes on and says, I got this objection today and I couldn't figure out how to overcome it, my national sales director, Ariel, is going to jump on and say, this is how I would overcome it, like in minutes, opposed to a weekly call, And then the last thing is we did just launch a tool, which is at the first phase, which gives our franchisees global views of, and they can sort and filter down of expenses. So it's easy to see what people are making. We have leaderboards, but you also need to know what your expenses are and if you're in line with everybody else, right? If I'm paying twice as much in staffing as the other people in Miami, well, I'm probably not going to be very profitable, right? So,
how are most franchisees manage? Like, what accounting software are they using to manage expenses and bookkeeping?
So we believe garbage in is garbage out. That's the best way to put that. So we work with a company called Markham. They're a huge, top 10 accounting firm. We negotiated a really strong deal for our franchisees. We covered part of the onboarding. We brought Markham on. They do the bookkeeping. That goes into QuickBooks Online. And then there's this tool that we have over the top called QVinci, which pulls everybody's expenses out, and we're able to see them. And they're able to see them and sort and filter them too. They might not be able to see, what your expenses are, but they'll see in the region, studio number 1, number 2, it won't show the name,
Oh, interesting. So at the unit level, but anonymizing, so it's not obvious it's so and so.
Yeah, I don't want them to know it's your staffing. I just want them to know somebody else in Miami has the staffing, right?
Okay. Yeah, I'd imagine like less than 5% of franchisors are going to that level to help their franchisees manage the bottom line.
Yeah, I think we have what we call our hierarchy of needs at Body 20. It's actually the bottom of our hierarchy of needs. We believe that in our business, team is number one. It's the most important. You have a good team, I can't really teach anybody anything if they're not going to listen, right? So first thing our business coaches take a look at is your team. Second thing is sales, because you have to get people in the door. If you don't get people in the door, nobody's going to try to work out. You're not going to have a business. Exactly. Number 3 is member experience. We need to make sure those members are happy. They're not quitting. We track it through an NPS score. The average NPS score in the industry, I think, is like a 60 for fitness, 61, 62. Ours is a high 80. So we're doing extremely well in the customer service. Part of that has to do with we're not group, we're one-on-one. That always helps, right? Better relationship. But then after all that's said and done, now we'll look at your bottom line. Now we'll look at how do we optimize that bottom line and make more profit. So yeah.
And what regions of the U.S. are you most looking forward to opening up studios?
I would say the most dense regions and the ones that are opening the fastest right now would be Atlanta, Chicago, Dallas. Texas in general is growing really, really quickly. Colorado. These markets are growing the fastest. I actually moved to Texas. One of the reasons was the amount of growth we had here. I want to make sure we're close to support. And it was in the early phases of this kind of 2.0 version after we separated from the South African concept. And, when we separated, we really changed everything. We changed, the only thing we share today is we technically use the same piece of equipment and have a name. Like even the modality is different. Like everything is changed for the U.S. consumer, right? They did amazing in South Africa, but different people, right? Different consumers. So yeah, those are our top growing markets. I think the markets we want to grow in the most is we want to find a way to go into California. I think it's fitness in California are synonymous. We've got a couple of test markets happening. It's just a different world. Higher expenses, higher build costs, higher rents, higher everything. So we need to stress test the model first. We never want to try something on a franchisee, right? That's
you're going to open up a corporate location or two in California?
No, we have a really highly qualified franchisee who is willing to take the risk. We've gone through it with them. We've changed the model a little bit. We have some backstop for them just in case, right? And it's really just about raising the price point. We've tested that. It's worked in other markets. It's not being irresponsible with growth is what I would say. It's not selling 100 units in California and saying, we've never tried it in California, but let's sell 100 units. We're doing one at a time. Let's see how it works. 3 major markets. one in each. And then if it works great, we can start to expand.
And I imagine, I mean, talking to and studying a lot of fitness brands, it seems like you're the biggest one that you have the most units in development as well as open that does one-on-one, like
Um,
one-on-one training.
Without EMS, I'm not sure. I know there's a really big one called Gym Guys out of New York. I don't know how
Oh
many
yeah,
they have, but
yeah.
I'd imagine they probably have more units open than we do,
I think they have
and
like
maybe
a
even more sold.
yeah around 100 or 120, I believe.
Yeah, so they're bigger than us there. And then I think if you're going to go one on one, you kind of have to talk about stretch. And then there's two major players there that are bigger than us. But for EMS, certainly, and I'd say we're one of the biggest in the actual one on one category. Also by growth, we were just ranked number one in the Inc. 5000 for any franchisor or any fitness franchisor. So
It's huge.
we're 292 overall, but we're the top ranked fitness franchisor and
And
franchisor
what's
in
the
the
corporate
industry.
headcount like? How many employees do you have at the corporate level?
We have 28 corporate employees for 34 open units. So
I was going to say that's a pretty good coverage ratio.
yeah.
You're set up to get these other locations
Yes.
open and
Yeah,
operating.
we stopped growing in early 2022 again and said, look, we brought on a partner named Bob McQuillan. He's been incredible for the business. He had wonderful experience with Hollywood Tans, and then he was a partner at Hand and Stone Massage.
Oh yeah.
They just recently had a very nice exit, one of the best kind of run brands I think around in general, right? We brought a lot of people over from Hand and Stone. If you look at our roster, but Bob came over first, and I think he promised us like 4 franchise sales a month. And he started in September of 21, and by December we had like 50 something sold, and we were like, okay, Bob, you're going to stop for a second,
Yeah.
and we're going to like staff up and get ready for the scale, and so then he proceeded to sell in 2022 140 units, and just really qualified candidates. We got really strict on who we were letting in, and it didn't matter. The guy just was going, and goes to what we talked about earlier. Is we stopped for 2.5 years to get unit economics right, and then once they were right, it really exploded and kind of blossomed. And then we've made sure that we scaled up the whole way. I think standard industry kind of what you should have is like one corporate employee for every 25 to 35 locations. But the thing is that they also grow at maybe 3 to 5 locations a month, right? And the last year we've doubled in size twice. Like I said, in the next 3 to 4 months we'll double in size again. We just have too many in development. We're certainly the fastest growing, I'd imagine, fitness franchise or on the one-on-one space.
So what's the best way if someone's interested in opening up a bottom 20? What's the best way to go about the process? How would you direct them?
So we have a website, www.body20.com, BODY20.com, and go on there and hit start a franchise. There'll be a quick form. The form is just going to ask you some basic info. We're pretty transparent about what you need to have to be qualified. We don't believe in setting people up who can't actually afford to do it. We want to make sure that it's responsible for you. Then you'll get an application right after that. You'll get a phone call probably the same day from one of our great franchise administrators, either Sarah or Anya, and we'll get you into the process. It takes about 90 days to go from I submitted my form to I can come to a discovery day, and we can have a real kind of in-person interview and have there's presentations in between to make sure you're truly interested. But then when you come out, we want to make sure we are partnering with somebody. We're not just taking somebody's money.
Yeah, and the franchise agreements for how long?
10 years.
Yeah, so it's a true partnership.
It is. It is. I think my favorite thing about franchising so far is it's the one avenue of business that I've ever, and I've owned businesses, I've worked for other people. My partners have, exited 2 9-figure exits in their life, right? Greg and Carrie, who are chairman and CEO, and Bob obviously had a 9-figure exit at Hand and Stone. And the one thing that remains true, I think that all of us agree on, is there's no business model that is as kind of conjoined and aligned in interest, right, as the franchise model, right? If the franchisor is set up the right way, and you can see it in their FDD. When I give my FDD presentation, I actually explain this, that, you can see whether or not they're making money on their royalty or everywhere else. Mm-hmm. And as long as they're making their money on the royalty, they're always going to want the best thing for you, because the best thing for you is to drive more revenue, right?
Interests are aligned.
Exactly.
And we've seen that, especially with some of your other peers in the fitness space, where they're making half of their sales are from just equipment sales, and they're really just driving, equipment sales, where talking to some franchisees in some of these networks, they could buy it for cheaper from another supplier. So those are all things that franchisees need to look at.
Yeah, we have a pretty strong rule about where we make money and where we don't. When we make money on things like equipment or something like that, we didn't do it until our economics were more than good enough. So we actually took zero money for a very long time. And then when we started taking it, it was if, the regular retail price is X and we drop it 10 grand. Well, we're going to make sure that the franchisee has the savings. We're not going to take all 10 grand. We're probably going to take 2, maybe 3, depending on what we have to do to get it there. If it's purely a rebate, it's probably like 10, we got the price really far down. We manage the logistics for you. We manage all that stuff. There is teammates that have to do that, right? Making sure that things arrive on time for build. Because I also like to explain to franchisees, I think a lot of times there's no saying that in franchising, every time a franchisee has to write you a check, they're going to be more and more upset with you, right?
Yeah,
so you have to explain, you have to explain the value of the check, right? And I think the value of the check for us is you have a 10-year agreement. You should assume that at a mature business, that's 15 to 25 grand in revenue per week. So every week you're delayed because somebody's not helping you through logistics, you're losing revenue. And that revenue ultimately turns into profit and the return you could have gotten in those 10 years on your investment. So our goal is to get you open super fast, super efficiently. We try to make sure that everything is cheaper than you get anywhere else. Occasionally, I've had some times where like a local sound vendor will be cheaper than our national vendor, but logistically, can they deliver? Can they do all those things? We'll have a meeting with them if they can. We'll let that franchisee use them, and they save some money, and it's no big deal. But we're
that's
not
on
going to switch
you
the
if
whole
they
network.
can't deliver and there's a delay. They could
Exactly.
use that.
Yeah. And we actually have our franchisee sign an agreement that says, I understand I'm choosing to do this. You know, we don't force anybody. We're not believers in like ultimate hard stop. You have to use our vendors. We want you to believe that you should use our vendors because you trust us.
Yeah, that's well said. Any concluding thoughts for prospective franchisees, people looking to open up a business?
Yeah, I think all too often people look at two things. They look at excitement and passion, right? And I think my big belief is it shouldn't be passion driven. It should be return driven. You should talk to franchisees. You should find out where the return is coming from, how much that return is. And if the return makes sense to you, you can use that return to do your passion. You don't need to do your passion as a business.
I love it. Well, great, Chris. Thanks again for joining. We'll be sure to include in the show notes the links, body20.com, and anyone interested can reach out. And a member from Chris's team will be in contact after completing the application.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks, Chris.